Hello and welcome back to As an Aggregator. Today we are answering a foundational question. What is As an Aggregator actually building? That question has 5 parts and I want to walk through all 5 because the honest answer requires all 5. Here's what we are covering. We are covering an intellectual origin, a moment where a theory about networks changed how I understood what a playlist actually is. We are covering external validation, a discovery that confirmed the gap was real, large enough to sustain multiple operations building from different directions simultaneously without any of them running into each other. We are covering what it means to rehypothecate knowledge as a content curator, what that looks like in practice, and why it is a more honest mission than trying to build everything from scratch. We are covering the bridge, not from consumer to creator, from passive consumer to content curator. And we are covering the foundational return, the pattern that keeps recurring on this journey, and the one move you can make right now for this video is even over to take your first deliberate step. Let's get into it. Question number 1. What is As an Aggregator actually building? And what was the discovery that externally validated the premise of this channel? I want to start with the doctrinal origin, not the business origin, the intellectual one, because As an Aggregator was born from a real gap in the marketplace. The gap between what YouTube gives content consumers by default and what a content consumer actually needs in order to operate the platform deliberately. I felt that gap from the inside before I could name it from the outside. I had been consuming content on YouTube since before 2010. I've developed over 1,000 subscriptions, and I kept running into the same problem. The feed serves you. The recommendation engine surfaces what it predicts you want. But you have no structured record of what you have actually consumed, no actual architecture for why you consumed it, no language to describe the shape of your own media diet. And that is the gap. Now, here is where the intellectual origin comes in. I encountered hypergraph theory as a framework for encountering thinking about networks, and something clicked. Because if hypergraph theory is valid, if a hypergraph is a structure where a single edge can connect more than 2 nodes simultaneously, then a playlist is not just a link. It is not just a vertex pointing to a single video. It is not just an edge connecting one piece of content to another. A playlist is a hyper edge. It scaffolds multiple pieces of content together in a way that is operative for a consume digest. That is a structurally different object from what YouTube's default memory system offers you. Think about what YouTube gives you by default: watch history, a recommendation feed, a notification tab. None of those are structured. None of those gives you the relational architecture you need to understand your own consumption at a meaningful level. A playlist, understood as a hypergraph edge, is a form of organized relational intelligence that the platform itself does not generate for you. You generate it. You impose it. That is the doctrinal claim at the foundation of this channel. That was the intellectual origin. Now, the gap needed external confirmation, and I got it. At some point, I recognized that the creator economy had 2 pillars: content creators on the one side, content consumers on the other. And there was no established pathway to monetize content consumption itself. You could monetize content creation, build a channel, run ads, sell a course, but there was no recognized role, no named, transmissible, methodological role for the person whose primary activity is consuming, organizing, and contextualizing content at a high level of intentionality. And that recognition was clarifying because it told me what the third pillar was. Not just a label, not just a category, the role with a role with its own methods, its own practice, and its own economic horizon. The content curator. And when that clicked, it felt like an epiphany. It felt like I can do this. I can use playlists and playlist technique and playlist theory to teach others how to become content curators so that we can actually embody the third pillar of the creator economy. Not just being a creator, not just being a consumer, being a content curator. That felt powerful. That felt liberating. That felt validating in a way I had not fully anticipated at the beginning of this journey. Before we go to question 2, I want to redirect you for a moment. Everything we have just described, playlists as hyperedges, content consumption organized, the Consume Digest, you can experience all of that directly on our playlist archive channel. That's go to Mr. Pollock 890. That's Mr. Pollik 890. Find any playlist that interests you. Start consuming content through the archive. That is what we are building. That is what it looks like in practice, Mr. Pollock 890. We will be here when you get back. Question number 2. What does it mean when external confirmation of your premise arrives, not from a collaborator or a mentor, but from a competitor you have never heard of? And what does that tell you about the size and legitimacy of the problem you are trying to solve? I'm going to be precise about this discovery because it hit me at a specific cadence. While consuming content in a static video anchor playlist published by As An Aggregator, the YouTube related videos feature surfaced a company I had never encountered, a company called Filtered. Filtered is a business-to-business organization that had built an entire operation around playlist curation for learning, education, and development. They were serving enterprises, businesses using curated learning workflows to deliver organized content to their employees. And the feeling that hit me when I found that was not competition, it was confirmation. Someone else had seen the same gap and operationalized it from a completely different market. Now, let me tell you what that means. It means the market is so large that a company could develop a relatively mature product market fit in a specific cross-section of the curation economy, the B2B enterprise learning and development cross-section. And I would not have even known they existed because they are building from a completely different orientation. They are not building from inside the YouTube cybernetic ecology. They are not talking to content consumers who are trying to operate the recommendation engine deliberately. They are talking to businesses, selling curated learning workflows to companies who need to train their employees. That is a different market from ours entirely. We are primarily business to consumer, business to content consumers. And seeing a B2B organization with this level of development operating in an adjacent space, that tells me something crucial about the total addressable size of this problem. It tells me the problem is immense. It tells me the problem is being solved from different sides simultaneously. And I had never considered that. I was building as an aggregator from the inside, thinking about YouTube as a cybernetic ecology, thinking about the creator economy, thinking about content consumers, content creators, content curators. I never thought businesses need to teach their employees how to engage with curated content. I never thought there are primary curators out there synthesizing information and delivering it as curated consume digests for organizations at scale. That is an entire dimension of this market I had not fathomed. And that is what the filtered discovery tells you about the legitimacy of the problem. They have revenue. They have product market fit. They are solving it commercially in the B2B space. That is as external a validation as you can get. It tells me that the size of the problem I'm trying to solve is impactful, weighed, and being approached from multiple directions simultaneously. And that means we have a lot of room to grow. Question number 3. What does it mean to rehypothecate knowledge in this context? What does that look like as an actual practice? And why is that a more honest and more sustainable mission than trying to build everything from scratch? Let me start with the distinction that makes this question necessary. What it means to be a content creator is that you create content. You identify a gap in supply and you fill it. What it means to be a content curator is that you assume the content has already been created. Your job is not to fill a supply gap. Your job is to map the surface area of an existing domain, understand its shape, and aggregate what is already there, to distill it, to index it, and then to rehypothecate it as a hypergraph edge or a hypergraph vector. That increases hypergraph saturation for other content consumers. That is the full phrase, and every word of it matters. Aggregate what is already out there, distill it, rehypothecate it as a hypergraph edge or a hypergraph vector that increases hypergraph saturation for other content consumers. That is what we do. Now, what does rehypothecation actually look like in practice? It looks like this. You encounter a piece of content, a framework, a structured insight, a distillation pathway that you had not previously formalized yourself. You do not reproduce it. You do not pass it off as your own. You package it. You distill it as a reflection of a sourced insight you have garnered. And that sourced insight becomes a hypergraph reference. You point to it, you cite it, you say, this is something meaningful, something important, something meaningful, something useful, and this is where it actually came from. That is what it looks like to rehypothecate knowledge in the context of curation. And the filtered discovery was a live example, because Filtered had a distillation pathway built around curating a learning pathway for enterprise clients. Their process moved through 6 stages: research, gather, cull, structure, review, publish. Those 6 stages. They were publishing playlist technique without realizing it was playlist technique. They were building a curatorial workflow in the context of enterprise learning, and that workflow mapped directly onto what playlist theory asks of a content curator. So we were able to use that as a hypergraph reference, aggregate it, distill it, apply it as a stencil to our own curatorial instincts. And by citing filtered, by giving credit, by pointing to the source, we accomplished two things simultaneously. We developed and distilled an aspect of playlist technique using the filtered framework as a stencil. And we created a hypergraph reference point because we cited the place where we found the insight and gave credit to the organization that surfaced it. That is why rehypothecation matters and why it is a more honest and more sustainable mission than building everything from scratch. Because you cannot build everything from scratch and remain a curator. If you are building everything from scratch, you are a content creator first and foremost. Content curation is about finding what's already out there, scouting it, distilling it, aggregating it, rehypothecating it as a hypergraph edge or a redirect, a hypergraph vector. To increase hypergraph saturation for other content consumers, that is the entire point. We are roughly halfway through this video, and I want to pause here. If what we are describing resonates with you, if you have ever felt like the platform is serving you content, but not giving you a structure for what you are actually consuming, go to Mr. Pollock 890. Mr. P-O-L-I-K 890. Look at the playlist architecture. See what a consume digest actually looks like when it's been organized into consume digest categories in the context of category-specific playlists, ASAP quick picks, temporal playlists. That is a live example of what a rehypothecation produces at the level of a channel architecture. Mr. Pollock 890. Question 4. What does the bridge actually look like in practice? What does it give someone who crosses it that they did not have before? And why is the destination curator rather than creator? The mission of As An Aggregator, stated simply, is this. If you have been getting super served by the algorithm without developing a consume digest, without building a playlist system, without acquiring the language to describe what you consume and why, this channel is the bridge. Not from consumer to creator, from passive consumer to active content curator. Let me unpack what that bridge actually looks like in practice. In practice, the bridge looks like using playlist theory. It looks like developing the language to describe the shape of your own consume digest. It looks like moving from a state where the platform decides what you watch next to a state where you are making deliberate decisions about what content enters your hypergraph and why. And here is what that transition gives you that you did not have before. It gives you agency over your hypergraph, agency over your consume digest, because now you can interact with YouTube as a cybernetic ecology in a way that is qualitatively different from how you were operating before. You can augment your subscription box. You can shape your consume digest as a reflection of your home screen, your watch history, your recommendation feed, your YouTube algorithm. You can use different levers inside what we call the 7 pillars of YouTube to tweak the algorithm rather than be moved by it. You can use a linguistic point plane vector, a precise search term, to condition your recommendation feed. You can use your watch history deliberately rather than letting it accumulate passively. You can use playlists to signal intent to the algorithm. You can use negative prompting, hitting not interested, to actively shape what the system surfaces. You develop all of these knobs, dials, and switches. You go from being a passive recipient of the platform's decisions to being an agent within the cybernetic ecology of YouTube. That is what someone gets when they cross this bridge. They get access to their hypergraph as an itemized consume digest. They get the ability to understand why they consume the content they consume. They get tools they did not know existed because the platform has no interest in teaching them to you. Now, why is the destination curator rather than creator? I want this to land clearly because it is the most important distinction in this channel. Content creators are on the supply side. They produce content. They identify gaps in supply and fill them. Content curators and content consumers are on the demand side. We are demand side. We are not producing new content to fill a supply gap. We are organizing, distilling, and rehypothecating content that already exists. We are operating from inside the consumption field. That is a completely different orientation from content creation. And that orientation matters because it defines what we are for. We are not trying to add more content to the platform. We are trying to give content consumers the tools to operate the platform deliberately. And then, when those consumers are ready to help them recognize themselves as curators, as the third pillar, we are trying to give content consumers the tools to operate the platform deliberately. And then, when those consumers are ready, to help them recognize themselves as curators, as the third pillar. Because content curation is about monetizing content consumption, not content creation, the platform already has a well-understood model for monetizing creation. What does not yet have a fully established model is monetizing consumption. We believe you can capture 10% of the consumer marketplace just through curation. 10% of the people who are consuming content on YouTube right now could transition from passive content consumers to active curators and generate real economic value from that transition. Not by becoming creators first, by becoming curators. That is what this channel exists to demonstrate. That is why the destination is curator rather than creator. Question number 5. What does the foundational return mean for As An Aggregator as a channel? What does it mean for you as a content consumer watching this? And what is the one thing you can do today, right now, before this video is even over, to take your first deliberate step from passive consumption toward building a consume digest that actually belongs to you? There is a pattern that keeps recurring on this journey. A foundational return. A moment where all the expansion and all the doctrine and all the development, you find yourself back at the beginning. Consuming the core basics, sitting down to contextualize your impressions, building the framework one block at a time. For As An Aggregator, as a channel, that foundational return means something specific. It means the questions we keep coming back to are not resolved. They are alive. What makes As An Aggregator a valuable resource in the content creator economy? What are the actual prerequisites of playlist theory? How do you search deliberately? How do you use your watch history to condition your algorithm rather than just accumulate content? What is a linguistic point plane vector? How do you use search operators? How do you use a watch later queue as an intentional curation tool rather than as a passive save function? All of these questions go back to the beginning, back to the heart of what we are trying to itemize as an aggregator. And that foundational return is not a failure of development, it is the nature of what we are building. Because what we are building is a methodology, not a finished product. A methodology can be taught, applied, and extended by every content consumer who crosses the bridge. For you, the person watching this, the foundational return means something equally simple. It means the most important move is the first move. Not the most sophisticated move, not the complete move, the first move. And here is what that first move is. It begins with a title. That first playlist you title, whether it is an ASAP quick pick, a category-specific quick pick, a temporal playlist, understanding the difference between those playlist titling schemas is your first foot in the door. It begins with the intent behind what a piece of content refers to in your hypergraph, scaffolding. Until you understand that, you are navigating without a map. Once you understand that, you have a map. You have a framework. You have the beginning of a consume digest that actually belongs to you. So here's the one thing you can do right now before this video is even over. Add a video to a playlist. Title that playlist deliberately. Do not use YouTube's default save function. Make a decision. Name a category. Express an intent. Give that playlist a title that means something to you. That is the beginning. That is what it looks like to move from passive consumption toward actively building a consume digest. It begins with a title. That is everything for today's video, and I want to close with a direct invitation. If you would like to see what a mature consume digest looks like, if you want to experience playlist architecture as a navigational tool rather than as a convenience feature, go to Mr. Pollock 890, MrPollik 890. On that channel, you will find the Start Here playlist. That playlist is designed to orient you from the very beginning of your journey as a content consumer. It is the front door. Or if you already know the type of content you want to move through, go to our posts section. We have a full range of publicly available and unlisted playlists across every category that As An Aggregator aggregates. Find the content that belongs in your consume digest. Start there. Build from there. And if this video has given you the language to describe what you already knew you were missing, you are already further along than you think. It begins with a title. We'll see you in the next one.